Photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis there's two main types of reaction. You have the light dependent reaction and you have the light independent reaction. So if we start with the light dependent reaction, this is all taking place inside a chloroplast. Inside the chloroplast we have a granum. That is made up of lots of thylakoids. And it is on the thylakoid membrane, which is what this is here, that you get the light dependent reaction occurring. So the light hits the photosystem 2. That causes the photolysis of water, so water breaks down into H+ ions and oxygen, as well as electrons. Those electrons are negative and they become attracted to the chlorophyll in the photo system that's in here. So the chlorophyll loses its electrons when the light hits it. That causes the electrons that have come from the photolysis of water to enter the chlorophyll. So the excited electrons are passed on to another protein. That transport protein is able to use the energy in the electrons to transport hydrogen ions into the thylakoid. So we start to accumulate hydrogen ions within the thylakoid. That accumulation of hydrogen ions in the thylakoid can then be used to drive an ATP synthase enzyme that, when the hydrogen ions pass through it, synthesizes ATP. So this is happening in photosystem 2. The electrons can then get passed along and enter photosystem 1. When they enter photosystem 1, the light hits those and excites them. So those electrons then move on to another protein and another enzyme, and that synthesizes NADPH, or reduced NADP, from non-reduced NADP. And that produces reduced NADP, which can be used in the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reaction, along with the ATP, to synthesize carbohydrates from carbon dioxide. So we have this non-cyclic phosphorylation, which is basically when the electrons pass from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1, and we get the synthesis of ATP and reduced NADP. You also have something called cyclic photophosphorylation. That's just where you have photosystem 1, and effectively what happens is the electrons get excited in photosystem 1, and instead of passing forwards, they pass back and go back into this system of proteins, which allows the movement of hydrogen ions so that you can generate your ATP. So all that happens is the electrons keep cycling back with the energy they've got from photosystem 1 back to the proteins, moving the hydrogen ions in, which then allows the hydrogen ions to move through the ATP synthase to make ATP. So cyclic photophosphorylation just uses photosystem 1 and just generates ATP. Non-cyclic photophosphorylation uses photosystem 2, photosystem 1, generates ATP and generates reduced NADP. Once you've got your reduced NADP and your ATP, you can take them forwards and use them to make carbohydrates out of carbon dioxide. Now, each carbon dioxide molecule is only one carbon. Therefore, in order to get the hexose sugar like glucose, you need to do 6 turns of this Calvin cycle. What we start with is a 5-carbon compound called ribulose bisphosphate, or RUBP. In the presence of the enzyme Rubisco, carbon dioxide is added to that 5-carbon compound, and that makes a 6-carbon compound, but it's very, very unstable, so it becomes very quickly a 3-carbon compound called GP, or glycerate phosphate. That glycerate phosphate can then be converted into triose phosphate, but to do that you need to add in the ATP that you got from your light dependent reaction and your hydrogens from your reduced NADP. So the reduced NADP provides the hydrogens, the ATP provides the energy. That helps you to make triose phosphate. That TP can then be used to make glucose. So every 6 turns you will get a glucose, and then on each turn some of that TP is used to then regenerate the ribulose bisphosphate. Now, to regenerate your RUBP from TP, you have to add in more ATP. So your ATP is used in 2 places in the Calvin cycle in the light independent reaction. And your reduced NADP is just used to convert GP into TP. So remember, it's RUBP in the presence of Rubisco allows you to add carbon to it using the carbon dioxide. That generates the GP. then you add ATP energy, then you add hydrogens from the reduced NADP. That makes your TP. Some of the TP is used to make glucose, some of the TP is used to regenerate your ribulose bisphosphate using ATP, again from the light-dependent reaction. And that is an overview of photosynthesis. The light-independent reaction happens in the stroma, and the light-dependent reaction happens on the thylakoid.